You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey everybody, welcome to NightVision Radio. As you just heard, I'm your host, René Barnett. Glad you could join us tonight. It's going to be an interesting, very, very interesting night. Really excited about tonight's guest. Tonight I have with me author and screenwriter Marie D. Jones, and we're going to be walking through the dark world of mind control, and not just what you may be familiar with. You've heard about the government mind control programs, MK Ultra, all those things. Yes, absolutely, we're going to go there. But also how mind control has sort of been practiced through the ages, how we've sort of been programmed. But Marie's not going to leave us hanging, because she's going to redeem us a little bit later in the show with her book on archetypes, or the information that she covered in her book on archetypes, and how we can use those symbols, those sort of collective symbols of universal consciousness to help to reprogram ourselves. First, to deprogram ourselves from outside programming that's been thrown at us, not only throughout our lives, but our ancestors' lives. But how to get out of that. But then I got to warn you, because we might drop you back in it toward the end of the show, because Marie's got a new book that's coming out. I think it's going to be out in a couple months, but she's going to tell us all about that. But that is going to be on demons. That's a whole different ballgame, and we're going to find out what that's all about. But before we get any further down the line, let's introduce Marie. Hey, Marie, thanks for joining me tonight.
Hello there. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I thought the demons might have gotten into the Skype tonight when we started.
I'm flummoxed because I used it earlier, and it's like, what? And now it's saying won't connect. You need to update your account. It's always updated.
Oh,
so I don't know. I'll figure it out. Of course, 15 minutes before showtime, I'm like, what the heck?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Anyway, I hate technology. I really do.
Yeah, the joys of live radio, live broadcasting, period. I've done live TV too, and it's similar crazy experience. But anyhow, in thinking about tonight's show over the last, couple weeks or so since we first chatted online, I was looking, into your work in mind control, and, it does sort of conjure up images of, the military and, acronyms like MK Ultra and things like that. But it's much, much more than that, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think, most people watch movies and spy TV shows and conspiracy stories, and those are the images that they get, and rightfully so, because we do have a history. Our government does have a history of experimenting with different forms of mind control, and has for a long time, and I'm sure still is. But the thing is this is something that is going on day to day in ways that we're not even thinking about, or we may not even realize, especially when it comes to things like media manipulation and what goes on with the news that we watch and the news that gets passed around now, even on social networking. that we take for facts, and we very rarely research on our own, and that we don't understand is sponsored, it's spun, it's paid for, it's bought and sold by corporations that have specific agendas, and that is not a conspiracy. That is something that has been going on for quite a while, and it's a fact. And the more you become aware of it, the more you see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think that that's really good, because it means that once you wake up, it's kind of hard to go back to sleep.
And
it's like, wow, okay.
It kind of swings both ways, doesn't it? Depending on whose agenda may be being served at the moment, because I think that people, have sort of become distrustful, of the media or at least a faction of the population has become distrustful of media, and especially cable news, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so they tend to gravitate more toward, social media and online and more independent, or what they feel might be more independent programming. But I'm here to tell you that a lot of these people that seem independent on the internet, they're also being backed by someone, or they're just pushing their own agenda. So you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
We don't have a tendency to research. If we see something that sort of rings true to us, we just grab it and we run with it. And I've seen it a lot. And I actually fell for something this week on Facebook. I got some kind of a message that someone was trying to friend everyone. Don't friend this person because it's a virus and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well, I was really busy at the moment. And normally I Google that stuff and I make sure, is that a hoax? Because usually it's already outed by somebody. Well, this time I was like super busy, and I thought, I'll just go ahead and shoot this off to people, because if it's true, then in one instant, they could be, infected with this virus. So I sent it to a few people, and I thought, I don't care how busy I am, I'm going to stop. I looked at it. Yeah, it was a hoax. So I had to go back and say, I'm sorry, everyone. I didn't do my due diligence. And I think that's what you're talking about. We need to do our due diligence.
Well, even on social networking, I would say the vast majority of what gets passed around as news is opinion. It's spin, it's propaganda, it's somebody's take on something that is molded to look like a news story. Those are really, really insidious. There are things that go around that look like actual news headlines. They look like, they're legitimate and authentic. And even when you click and read them, it might take a while before you realize, this is not a real website. This is not, the real news website, or this is a parody, or this is just, somebody's blog that is created to look like some kind of official news service. And, nowadays, I think the idea is to overload us with information coming at us from all directions, and to kind of shake up our faith in our ability to discern truth from BS and truth from opinion. What passes for news today, the vast majority of it is opinion. And I don't know when that line between opinion and fact blurred, as crazy as it has been lately, and I think most of us are too busy, too tired, too distracted with our own lives to really stop and say, what's being done to me? How am I being manipulated here? And do I care? And sometimes we're so tired and lazy that we just, you said you pass something along without checking, because you think, well, this came from my friend so-and-so, and he's a pretty smart guy. He's not going to tell me something that's a hoax. And it's like, oh, shoot. And, there are email, there's spam and all kinds of hacks and things that go on. So there is that part of us that just has that knee-jerk reaction of, wanting to protect ourselves. But I think it gets overridden on social networking, because we want to be part of the crowd. We want to join in on all the reindeer games.
Oh, how
Right?
funny.
We don't want to be the one who, you don't want to be that one person who posts, this is a hoax, and
Exactly.
spoils all the fun.
Well, especially if it's like a cool story. They just discovered this or that,
Yeah,
Bigfoot,
Martians or
in downtown
Bigfoot. There you go.
LA.
Yeah,
And,
I
it's
know.
like, you don't want to be the one that goes and rains on everybody's parade,
Yeah,
So
I've had to
I
do that a
agree
few
with that.
times.
Yeah, yeah, me too. But now, it's funny because, we're talking about mind control and we're talking about it in terms of today, social media. And, earlier I mentioned about, the government programs that were so rampant and, probably still are, but they've probably just gone darker. I just don't
Oh,
know.
I
But we
think so. Yeah.
heard so much more about things, a few years ago, or maybe even a couple of decades ago. But what about, because I was reading about your work and you talked about how Egyptians practiced mind control. And after that, I want to get into, because what really intrigued me was you said something about the Knights Templar.
Well, if we look back at our history, okay, from the day that humans began to walk the earth, we know that human behavior, it's just human behavior, that we desired the ability to control other people. Could have been, our caveman, our cavewoman, other people in our tribe or group, enemies that we had. We wanted to control our environment. We wanted to control prey. And one of the ways, if we go back to primitive times, one of the ways of doing that was using, the idea of sympathetic magic, where you became the prey so that you could kind of get inside the heads of the animals that you wanted to kill to provide food for your family and your tribe. But, there were also interhuman interactions and conflicts where it obviously very quickly would have become necessary for people to anticipate the behavior of others and maybe even try to control it. So this is not new. Human behavior includes the desire to control the way people think, behave, and act, if it's to our benefit. And sometimes that gets out of hand. So if we go back in ancient times, where we obviously we weren't around to see their personal interactions, but where we see a lot of it is through ritual. We see a lot of mind control techniques that were used in ancient times, and primitive as well, I'm sure, where ritual was a very formal, structured way of getting people to behave a certain way or believe certain things, or bow down to the deities that were worshipped by these particular civilizations, to keep them under control. So you used structure, you used ritual, and included in that ritual was the type of language that sort of elaborated on following the rules and behaving. And then later, when we go into Christianity and the great Western religious traditions, we see it in their rituals as well. You go to church and the talk is all about not sinning and behaving the way that Jesus and God want you to, or Allah, whoever, whatever religion you happen to be following. And there's different rituals that you go through when you go to church, and you've got baptisms and, funeral rites and all these types of things that are very structured that keep us on a sort of specific path in terms of our behavior, our thoughts, and our actions. When you deviate from that, then you cause trouble to the
That's
church.
right. And you're out of the group and you can't play the reindeer games anymore. Now,
and that was part of the attraction of being involved in rituals, is that you felt a part of a group, of a unit. And that's where that also bleeds over into cult behavior, the desire to belong to a family or to belong to a certain group where you feel embraced.
Now, I see how that really, really is clear, that these rituals and these rules that are all sort of practiced together to sort of, give you a clear message. This is what you should do. This is what you wouldn't do. But what about some of the, in later times in Christianity, some of the, like the charismatic churches where people, you see a lot in the South where I'm from. And I know you're co-author on a lot of your work. Larry Flaxman is from Arkansas, so he probably has had some exposure to some of this as well. But these charismatic churches where they kind of work themselves up into a frenzy. Sometimes they'll do things like speaking in tongues or fainting, falling out, in ecstasy, and then
rapturous. So you get into a rapturous state of mind, right?
All the way to people, in those really remote hillside churches in Tennessee and in Mississippi where they handle snakes as part of a ritual. They drink arsenic as part of a ritual, so does that fit in as well with the mind control aspect?
Well, absolutely. And the funny thing is, although people that, belong to some of those more unusual or extreme religions will never admit, is that their rituals are very similar to those of Santeria and voodoo, where you work yourself into sort of a rapturous frenzy in order for the spirit to overtake you. That's no different from in some of these Christian denominations where, the Holy Spirit moves you and you're speaking in tongues and holding your hands up to the sky and whatnot. And the whole point of it is to get you into a certain state of consciousness. It's to alter your waking state into a more receptive state where you feel like now you're channeling God, you're communicating with the Holy Spirit or whatever. And, the thing is that there's no proof that that's actually happening. I mean, if you want to, approach it from a scientific point of view, but the belief is so powerful, and that creates for other people in the church the desire to also do those things, to also be, I want to be a channel for the Holy Spirit. How do I do this? And you have to become one of us, and you have to follow these rules and do these chantings and say these words and believe these things and eat these foods and wear these clothes, yada, 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 the whole list of rules. And a lot of times I know in some of the churches, I have some friends, and I'm not saying that all cavalry churches are like this, but I have some friends that literally escaped cavalry churches because of the control that the leadership in the churches were trying to have over their members to buy into all of these specific behaviors and to perform these rituals and have these beliefs. And if you questioned anything, you were cast out. Oh my gosh, you were not only cast out of the church, but you were chastised and literally blacklisted from your community. If you happen to live in a community where everybody went to that same church, your children were bullied at school. It wasn't just about misbehaving at church and getting your hand slapped. So it's all about following a very specific set of behaviors and adopting a very specific set of beliefs. And however that can happen, they'll do it. If the appeal is we handle snakes and we try to heal diseases without going to doctors, or we go into a rapturous spinning frenzy where we receive the word of God, and whatever works to kind of magnetize more people into the fold. Oh, these people are special. They do this. They talk directly to God.
It sounds almost like hypnosis, doesn't it?
It is. If you think about it, it is. You're putting your mind into an altered state.
An altered state, absolutely.
And what's the difference between that and doing drugs or drinking? You're doing it in a different setting, and the fact that you're with a whole bunch of other people, under the guise of communicating with, the Holy Spirit or whatever, that sort of makes it acceptable. But really it is about altering the state of your consciousness so that you can have some kind of spiritual experience.
It is. I wonder how many people have had my experience. I, grew up in southeastern Oklahoma, which is, we considered ourselves proudly from the South. I don't know why, but we were south of the Mason-Dixon line, so I guess that qualified us.
Yeah.
But anyhow, grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, which is not a charismatic church, but it's fairly fundamentalist. Christian church. And we did have, people who would, the Holy Ghost, we didn't call it the Holy Spirit, it was the Holy Ghost would come upon them, and they would come up to the front of the church and they would give a testimonial, they would testify in front of the church. And I remember, especially as a little girl, sitting there thinking, okay, I'm ready for the Holy Ghost. And the Holy Ghost just never came. And so I thought, oh, geez, I must be really a bad girl.
Lord, you did something wrong. Yeah.
I did something wrong because the Holy Ghost is just ignoring me. But where it did get me, and so I'm thinking, well, maybe some people are not as susceptible to the programming as deeply as others. But then where it did get me. I
agree, yeah.
Was I noticed, growing up, I had a very, strong interest in, edgy subjects, what some might call fringe, the things that you write about that we talk about here.
Right.
So metaphysics, paranormal, what have you, conspiracy, whatever. So I had a lot of interest in things like that, but I felt a little bit guilty. Like maybe I was messing around in the devil's business or something. And then when I started to really read as a young adult books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which called into question
life changer for me, boy.
I mean, it totally was a life changer for me. It totally changed the course of my life and my career.
Mind-blowing, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ended up making a movie about the whole thing. But it was... I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to go straight to hell for even reading this book. And it took several more years before I was able just to shake all that Baptist guilt, So whether or not
powerful weapon, isn't it? Guilt and shame, the two sisters of mental and behavioral control. And they work. They work. I mean, I'm a fallen Catholic. And when I was little, I loved the ritual of the Catholic Church. I thought it was beautiful. It was rapturous. I remember maybe being 7, 8 years old. We would only go to church on, Christmas, Easter, that kind of thing. But I loved the lights and the candles and the way that they, did the they spoke lyrically like they were half singing, and I would go into altered states. As soon as I got older, though, and I understood what they were saying, and then it was like all bets are off. And like you, I read books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and, got into the whole Magdalenian stuff. And it's like, wait a minute. And when the Nag Hammadi text, and I started to read the different Gospels that didn't get included in the Bible, but a lot of people don't ever do that. They continue. One of the fallacies about mind control is that it really is all about controlling your mind, and that's not true. Much of mind control involves controlling the behavior and actions, not just thoughts and beliefs, but the behavior of other people. And I have a really good friend who grew up Southern Baptist, and just the other night we were talking about her childhood and her youth, and, she was a rebellious teenager. And there, you either followed a very specific set of rules set down by the church, or you were a misfit. You were a cast out. You were a bad girl, and that's one of the ways that they manipulate you is by guilting and shaming not just the thoughts that go through your head, but the behaviors and actions. And when you get caught, you're punished. You're sort of hung out to dry in front of the whole church. Oh, look what this bad girl did. She's a whore, a tramp, Yep. Of course, it was usually always the women that got treated that way.
That's
But
true.
I mean, what you're saying is so funny that you mentioned Holy Blood, Holy Grail, because a lot of times people will be under the spell of the very cult-like behavior that churches and religious institutions use. And if you're lucky, something falls in your path, a book, a person, you take a class, you know, you go out in the woods and meditate and you have something come, sort of an aha moment, that totally wakes you up out of that spell, because it really is like you're under some type of spell. But it doesn't happen for a lot of people, or it doesn't happen until much later in life. Right now, I think, you know, so many people are under the spell of the media in much the same way you and I are talking about how people are under the spell of religion. Same thing, same types of techniques that are being used.
And do you think
you don't believe this? You know, you don't believe what this news person says. You're, you know, what kind of a dummy, or, you know, you're stupid and you're uneducated. And then the other side saying the same thing. You know, you don't understand this bill. You know, the Republicans, Democrats, they're all the same, but they'll find ways to make the other side look like idiots if they don't buy into the rhetoric that they're spewing.
Well, you know, the news media is kind of an obvious one, you know, because they're supposed to be telling us what's really going on, and so we're supposed to really believe it. But do you think that mind control aspect, and I'm getting this from a question in the chat room, and in my experience as a television film producer, I have not ever had anyone try to control what I would say, except maybe the network executives who wanted to make the story more exciting by, building, exaggerating something. Or putting some sex in or something like that. But the question from the chat room is from Chatwitch, and she says, do you think that corporations like use MK Ultra to control the movie and music stars to push their products? I don't know about pushing products.
This is a tough one because, I'm a writer. I'm working in the film and TV industry. I'm a writer. I'm a novelist. Nobody controls what I write about, at least not that I know of. So that's where, where's that fine line between I believe I am 100% under my own power, right? And I write about what I like, and wondering, who's putting these thoughts in my head?
Oh my gosh.
And that's entirely possible. However, there are movies and television series that government officials and agents have consulted on, taken part in. We know that. We know, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's my favorite movie. And I've seen it over 200 times. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So, on the surface, it's a really wonderful movie about an ordinary man put in extraordinary circumstances. One of the typical plot lines that you'll find in Hollywood. But, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the head of Project Blue Book at the time, was the consultant on that movie. And there was also a lot of discussion that Steven Spielberg had been talking to CIA and, other government officials, mainly about what could be shown and what should be avoided, that kind of thing. Now, that's probably very true. And there have been some other situations like that. I don't believe in the extreme conspiracy theory that I hear all the time, that, Beyonce and all these people are all controlled. These are people that are out to make money doing what they love to do. They're extremely successful, so they're targets for everybody's, spin to put on them.
Sure.
And are they all MK Ultra controlled? Wouldn't it be funny if they were? I cannot with 100% certainty say no, they're not. I don't know, but because I'm in that industry, and I worked for Warner Records for 7-8 years, and I knew tons of musicians and famous ones. And they were and I was married to a rocker who was in a band.
So was I.
So,
we'll talk later.
I know. My ex-husband was a guitar player and a really great one, and he did what he loved to do. And so that's a really interesting question that is almost impossible to answer with 100% certainty, because as artists, we're just doing what we love to do, and yet, are all of our minds being manipulated? I can't say no, and I can't say yes. That's scary.
Gosh. On that note, we're going to have to take a break, and when we come back, we'll try to redeem ourselves. We'll be back in just a moment with Marie D. Jones, so stay with us. Welcome back to Night Vision. I'm your host, René Barnett, and if you're just joining us tonight, we have with us Marie D. Jones. She's author and a screenwriter, and we've been talking about her book, Mind Wars, and about how not only our governments have practiced mind control and done mind control research on private citizens and all that jazz, but also how really mind control has come into play throughout history, including, in ancient times and even up into the medieval times of the Knights Templar and others. It's a way that people, it might not be something obvious. It might not be a mind control program, but they're using certain ways and certain techniques and certain symbols, certain language to manipulate us. So are we in a world of hurt, Marie? What can we do about this?
Well, the biggest problem is in our interpersonal relationships. Because here's the thing. In your familial and your friendship and your romantic relationships, there's constant mind control and behavioral control manipulation going on. Whether it's, having a parent who's narcissistic and greedy or abusive, or being with an abusive spouse, or just, the dating and all of the mind manipulation that goes on. So again, this is part of our natural human behavior. And my feeling is when you start looking around your own personal life at how other people try to get you to think, behave, and act certain ways to benefit them, and then even beyond that, how you do it to them, you do it to other people. And we wrote about that in the book too, because we really felt strongly that if you don't clean up the manipulation that goes on in our individual lives, we will continue to fall under the spell of that same manipulation on a grander scale, whether it's politics, religion, media, the government, what have you. And when you start to wake up to where this is happening in your own life, and the type of language that is being used, the type of intermittent reinforcement that, makes you go crazy, then you start to see it happening on the news. It becomes so much more easy to wake up to it. Once you're aware of it, that's where you get your power back. Once we wake up, we have our power back, then we can figure out how to start calling it out.
When I try to, briefly, examine, obviously I can, just out of hand, pick up a couple of examples of how I myself have tried to manipulate someone. Let's say I'm writing an email to someone in business, and I'm, trying to get them to do business with me, or I'm pitching a show or something. I'm wanting something from them. I'm going to frame that letter or that email in such a way, and I'm going to go back over it and say, ooh, this word sounds a little bit better than this or that. And it sort of changes slightly the tone or the meaning. How do you know when you're doing something that is just ordinary behavior and ordinary business? Because of course you want to put your best foot forward when you're trying to close a business deal. But when does it become manipulation, or when does it become negative? I guess it's all manipulation, but when does it?
Oh my gosh.
When do you know
That is
when you're
such
doing
a
a
good
bad
question.
thing?
I know. Well, and you're right. I mean, we all use exaggeration, embellishment, positive, negative reinforcement, praise, credit. We all use these same techniques in our personal lives because that's how we jockey to get the position that we need for what we feel like we need to survive and thrive. And especially in business, you want to get a certain outcome, and it's like, well, what's the best way for me to get this outcome, this deal, or this merger, or you and I, we pitch ideas. We want to get them to greenlight one of our ideas, and yes, there's an awful lot of manipulation that goes on. I think the difference is when you really try to change another person. There's that line where you can sort of encourage them to behave or respond a certain way or to give you what you want. Hopefully it's for both of your benefits. That's always a good thing. But
Right.
I think if it hurts the other person, if you're trying to change them, and you're using a lot of negative reinforcement and you're judging and criticizing and really, almost like destroying their character. I think when those attempts turn negative and you're hurting somebody or you're manipulating somebody to get something from them that's going to hurt them, even as it benefits you. Sure, we need to really look at that behavior. How can we expect our religious and, political leaders to behave any differently when we're making excuses for those same types of behaviors? And
Right.
I think it just really is a lot of self-reflection. Yes, when I pitch a project or, I might make myself look really great and I'm pumping up the verbiage and, I'm giving them the hard sell. And, when you want to merge with another company, you're giving them all of the good reasons why it's going to help their company if they merge and how they're going to benefit financially. And you might leave out some of the negatives. But I think if you're really doing things that hurt the other person or the other people, where you're trying to change them, where you're trying to control them in a very oppressive way and make them bad, make them the enemy if they go against what you want. And I think it's just something that we all have to kind of feel where
Right.
we cross that line. But that's a great question.
Oh, thanks. I guess, if you
Yeah.
have some self-awareness or you're developing self-awareness, I guess, you kind of know if something is not good
You do.
for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of can use your own gut and your own conscience. I think maybe in those instances, I don't know, but it's true. I mean, there is a lot of manipulation, and it seems like not all of it is entirely bad. So we have to be discerning, just like we do with the news, just like we do with everything else.
Exactly. Because you know what? We're human beings and we're all trying to get what we need. And a lot of times what stands in our way are other human beings. And I think you see this more than anywhere else in romantic relationships. Romantic relationships are the perfect model for mind control and behavioral control that you can then extrapolate to the bigger things like government, politics, and religion. The way that we, try to get our needs met, sometimes desperately, and the violence and abuse that can arise, and the addiction, to another person, it's just the same as a drug addiction, and the cult-like behaviors, he loves me not, and just the craziness of a romantic relationship is such a great model or blueprint.
It is.
But I always feel like, I look at some of our government leaders, as everyone else does, and on all sides of the fence, and think, oh my God, is this the best we can do? But then what I realize is they're our representatives. They represent us. And there is so much truth in that, because we lie, cheat, steal, manipulate judge, condemn, do all the same sins that they are doing. They just do them on a bigger scale, and it affects more people. So I think you were saying, well, how do we deal with this? What good can come out of this? Well, get control of yourself. Get control of your thoughts. Get control of your life, and really try to start identifying where you have been just sort of blindly led into different beliefs and ideals that maybe you really don't even agree with. They came from parents, they came from peers, they came from your religious institutions, they came from your college professors. Who are you? I think that really is at the bottom of this. Who are you?
And I think you're spot on.
You? Yeah. Who are you for real, and who are you in the eyes of those that wish to use and manipulate you? Those are two different people oftentimes.
They really are. I mean, my biggest pet peeve is, when you're having a discussion with someone, you feel like you're making a point and, some kind of really salient point, and then they say, well, that's just not how I was raised. And you want to go like, oh, my God, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Think outside.
You're gonna do some. It goes back to that thing we used to say as kids: if everybody jumped off a cliff, would you do it too?
Exactly.
Like, okay, there was a lot of truth in that saying.
But now, when we're getting aware of ourselves and getting control of ourselves, I think your book and please forgive me, I don't have the title of it right here in front of me as I should have, the book on archetypes.
Oh, the power of archetypes.
Yeah. Yes, and how we use those to overcome this programming and reprogram ourselves. How does that come into play? And could you first, before I say that, I've got to ask you a question from the chat room because I promised that I would. Durhuff asks, please ask Marie her views on the role of the pineal gland, real or fiction. Does that have any play going?
Well, yeah, and I think it's kind of dormant in most people, and I don't think it's fictional at all. I think it's the third eye that is so often referred to in myths and some of the religious texts. I think the problem is learning to see through that third eye, activating that gland. I don't know a lot about it, but from what I understand scientifically, it's kind of treated almost like an afterthought, like a dormant gland, and yet could be the basis for spiritual experiences, things that we refer to as paranormal experiences, altered states of consciousness. So, no, I would not say it's fictional at all. I think that there might be a lot of misinformation out there about what it is.
Sure.
And, if you purely Google any kind of scientific research, you're going to see, everything from a medical point of view. But
sure.
No, it's something that fascinates and intrigues me too. And every now and then, I think, just as with people who research with DMT, and don't ask me to name the whole dimethy, but DMT, is present in very small amounts in the human brain. When it's activated, could that be what's creating paranormal and religious, rapturous, spiritual experiences? And I think it's the same with the pineal gland.
Yeah.
Some
and do you
call
think
it the doorway to the soul, the doorway to other universes? There's all kinds of labels that I hear.
Sure. When you say that, and I agree that a lot of people, their pineal gland is lying dormant. Do you think that is part of our programming? Because certainly if everybody's third eye was wide open, wouldn't we be less susceptible to control?
Well, I think I've heard too that there is actual, you could say the word, calcification of the pineal gland that occurs when it's not used, and I think that's, par for the course for a lot of the parts of the human body and especially parts of our brain that are dormant that are yet activated in other people. Like if you look at prodigies and savants,
Yes.
They're, definitely using parts of the brains that some of us probably, rarely touch upon. So I know that there's a lot of talk about the pineal gland being calcified or having calcification because it doesn't get used. However, and then you hear, a lot of metaphysical and spiritual writers talk about when it's activated, when you look through, and I'm not talking about literally looking, looking at something the way that you would visually, but when you experience or perceive through that third eye, that's where you get the real truth. That's where you actually find clarity. But we are conditioned, mind control, as a society to believe that what we see with our two eyeballs is the truth. That what we see visually and what we perceive visually is reality. But we, come on, our quantum and theoretical physicists are constantly telling us, no, there's a lot more to reality than what you see with your two eyes and what meets the eye. And so perhaps that gland, when it's active, when it's working properly, is where we get to perceive those other realities. And I don't know that that's something that we're meant to do all the time, because if you think about it, it would be really hard to function in the life that we are consciously aware of, which is this one, if we were constantly being exposed to other universes or timelines or realities or dimensions or what have you, or even having spiritual or paranormal or religious experiences 24/7. I honestly think that would drive people crazy. And I mean crazy as in insane. You would become imbalanced.
It probably has in certain people.
Maybe the
or
great artists like Van Gogh and a lot of our great artists and musicians and geniuses who, they were not able to live the normal realities that we take for granted because they were more activated than we were. I'm just speculating here,
Even Einstein, he could barely, find his own house. He was so much.
Yeah, it's so funny because my dad passed away a few years ago. He was a geophysicist. He was a scientist. We used to always tease him. He was like this brilliant scientist, but he couldn't match his socks. He was like, when it came to life, he was inept, and he would laugh about it too. But, as a scientist, he was brilliant. He could see realities that, but then he couldn't find two black socks that matched. So that could very well be true. And I like to think that when we're having these discussions and people in the chat room, that anybody who is interested in this kind of thing and opens their mind to it is getting rid of some of that calcification, and getting it active again and trying to perceive the real truth that underlies all realities, if we can ever possibly do that.
So just the act of seeking the truth, wanting the truth, is actually part of the activation process.
I would think that
I guess it has to be there, or you could certainly
absolutely
couldn't get any further unless you did have that desire. Without that desire, I guess there's no further development. But now, what about the archetypes? Can you explain, just in case someone listening may not have a clear idea, what is an archetype?
Well, one of the reasons why I wrote this book was after Mind Wars, I was like, oh my God.
You can't leave us like that.
How do we take back our control? Well, guess what? I think, most people have heard it said that 90% of your behavior and your actions, beliefs, who you are, is programmed in your subconscious. Your conscious mind is clueless. So 90%. And I've seen that amount, in different studies and things, and that's like the average. So what that means is that a very large part of who you are as a human being is on automatic pilot. You're not even aware of it. You're not aware of where it came from. You're not aware of why you believe certain, you don't even question it. Why? Because we're all busy. We don't have time to slow down and go, why the hell did the same patterns keep showing up in my life? Where did this all start? why do I believe this? It doesn't really feel right. It doesn't resonate. Why have I believed this all my life? So I wrote the book because I had been going through a period where a lot of very specific behavioral patterns kept raising their ugly head in my life. And I noticed how we label ourselves. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an addict. I'm skinny. I'm fat. I'm ugly. We label ourselves. We choose symbols by which we express ourselves. I'm a writer. Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm an entrepreneur. Okay, so everything that we use to express ourselves kind of comes down to symbols. But do those symbols serve us? Now, archetypes are very specific, universal symbols that are found in myth and story and religion, and they're found in every aspect of life. And what makes them so powerful is that they exist in what Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, called the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious is a part of each and every human being that is like just below the level of the subconscious mind. And it unifies us. But there's a whole lot of crap down there that we don't even question, yet it drives our lives. And that's where archetypes live. So the archetypes like the goddess, the hero, the villain, the victim, that's a big one in society right now. The anti-hero, the mother, the father figure, the prince, the diva. There's just so many different archetypes that I go through in the book. Talk about what they are, where they kind of originated from, and how they are influencing our lives. And the key is that if we slow down long enough to really look at the way that we describe ourselves and also look at the way other people see us, that's when we can identify the archetypes that are driving our behaviors and actions and beliefs. For me, for years, the big one was victim. Oh my gosh. And I got to a point where I was sick and tired of being a victim. And I really had to look at, where did this start? How is it perpetuated? How am I still buying into this archetypal symbol in my life? Now, how do I change it? I don't want to be a victim anymore. I want to be a warrior. And I started doing certain processes, some of which are in the book, in order to switch out the archetypes that I felt were not helpful and serving me well, and replace them with a more empowering, positive, beneficial, powerful archetype. Because really, everything is, we're all a hodgepodge of different archetypes. It's the ones that we allow to control us, there's that mind control connection, that create the life that we're living. So if you say to yourself, how the hell did I get here? Why is my life like this? My life is a mess. I'm not married to the person that I love, blah, blah, blah. I don't have the job that I love. I'm unhealthy. Well, if you really start to look at the behavioral patterns that got you there, it is because you bought into certain symbols that were either given to you from other people, or you bought into yourself along the path of your life. And now you have the power to identify them, decide which ones you're going to keep, and kick the other ones to the curb.
You mean like the dirty girl archetype?
I like that one, though.
I kind of like that.
Yeah. And another thing with archetypes is how you spin them. Because
that's true.
Goddess, God and goddess are two of the archetypes that Carl Jung, he had about 12, and some of them kind of swapped out here and there that he felt were really the most universal. But so you could think of yourself as a goddess in a positive way, but you can also turn that negative and be just a diva, bitch, and think that you're, and be arrogant and narcissistic about it. So each archetype has a sort of a positive and a negative spin to it. I like, for me, really swapping out the victim for warrior was so important, and it has turned me into a completely different person. But I have to be really careful that I don't allow the warrior to become warlike. That's when that archetype has gone a little too far. You can be a warrior for your own benefit, for good, for your kids, your family, whatever. But if you become warlike, that's, then you've kind of gone into the negative. So I love this book. It's one of the first times I've really been able to, really look at my own behaviors and then lay them down, what I've learned and what I am learning, in a way that I hope, and I think the feedback already has been fantastic, that will help other people.
Oh, that's great. We're going to talk a little bit more about that after the break. We're going to talk more about archetypes and how they can help us. And also, we're going to get back into the dark side before we go tonight. We're going to talk about...
with one of those big archetypes. I know which one you're talking about.
Boy. All right. Hang in there with us. We'll be right back, folks. Hey, welcome back to Night Vision. I'm having such a good time with my guest tonight, René D. Jones, author and screenwriter. We've been talking about mind control and how we've been programmed, our whole lives, and not only our whole lives, but throughout the centuries. Either, people that have a mind control program, or they're just practicing manipulative ways on us. And it sort of worked its way down through time. And it's actually, as according to Marie, is sort of part of our human nature to want to control things and want to control others. So we kind of have to watch that in our own selves. We've been talking about then after that how to use archetypes to sort of change our view of ourselves, and in so doing sort of change our direction in life and be more positive and go in more of a direction that we want to go. So now, you talked about how you used the archetype of the warrior. So now, how did you, when you say you used that, how did you use it? Did you just start envisioning yourself that way? Or how do you use that archetype?
When I was writing the book, I actually interviewed a couple of people that had different really, kind of cool techniques that I actually put in the book. Meditations and visualizations that were really helpful. Here's the thing, we're fighting not only the subconscious mind, which is unbelievably powerful, way more powerful than our conscious mind, mostly because we have no idea everything that's in it from the time that we were born, just all of the past memories and experiences and beliefs are all accumulated there. But then, as Carl Jung suggests, there's this collective unconscious that goes even below that. And it's almost like a collective subconscious mind, but we all share. So that's one of the reasons why certain movies or TV shows or stories or novels resonate with so many people, because they're universal. And that's why, fairy tales and Disney stories and the boy meets girl love stories. There's certain types of music that doesn't matter where you come from, what country or nationality or, what your belief system is, they resonate. Those are universal and they're archetypal. So, but when that comes down to you as an individual, if we don't stop and take a look at the behaviors and the thoughts going through our minds that are creating our reality, and if we're really unhappy with our reality or parts of it, and we're not able to go deep enough to where all of this originated, which is in the subconscious, and then even further deep in the collective unconscious, we're never going to, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. We're never going to really be able to heal or change. So for me, it was really, I went through a couple of classes. There were actually 6-month-long classes. It was a women's workshop where we really looked at this kind of thing, and you got it out on the table. And you know, a lot of writing and journaling and a lot of really examining, where did my beliefs come from? Why do I keep having these same patterns? Can I trace far as, as far back as I possibly can to where this pattern might have begun. And when you do that, you find out that, yes, you can. And that's where you start to see where you've given your power away all along the course of your life. And so if you go around, and a lot of times the clues come from what you complain about the most. Okay, so say you're someone who complains all the time about, I'm really sick and tired of people taking advantage of me. Oh my God, I'm so tired. Somebody took advantage of me again. Why am I always taken for granted? Blah, blah, blah. Those are clues that you are playing the victim, the big V, okay? That's your archetype. It's not your only one. You've got more, but that's your big one. If you're always going around saying, God, I'm so sick, and I'm so sick, and I feel so sick, and I'm so weak, your archetype is the weakling. You can kind of see by what you complain about, right?
And
so
what about when
my God.
I'm sorry. What about
oh good, no.
This is what I've noticed in myself. At some point I started realizing this, having this tiny pin light of self-awareness, that when someone annoys me with a behavior and I'm feeling like, oh, they're so stupid, they don't know what they're doing, and why do they do this and that? If I really look at it, there's something in what they're doing that I don't like about myself.
Absolutely. People are mirrors. They're mirrors for our own behaviors and BS and stuff that we're in.
It's like I'll gravitate right toward that. That's right.
Yeah.
And I'll just think, how can they do this and do that and be that stupid or this, that, and the other? I mean, I don't say this out loud, mind you, because I wouldn't want anyone else to know what a bad person I am.
But it's going through your head, and the thing is, we're not aware of 90%, if not more, of the thoughts that go through our head. And when you become aware of what you think about, you might be in shock. Oh, wow, I think about a lot of really negative stuff, and I really beat the crap out of myself and put myself down and call myself stupid, ugly, unattractive, a failure. It's like, wow, no wonder my life is sucks. But, so you could take as an example, though, somebody, let's say it's a woman who caretakes too much. So she's constantly taking care of her husband. Maybe he's an alcoholic or whatever. She's taking care of her elderly parents. She's raising 6 kids. She's on the PTA board, and she's, volunteer. She's a martyr. Okay, that's her archetype. She is a martyr. And even though she's doing all that with love, it's building incredible resentment in her, and it's also making her physically and mentally sick. So until she can look and say, oh my God, I don't want to be a martyr. I want to be, I want to take back some of my power. I want to be a nurturer, certainly, but I want to be more of a goddess. I want to be more of a, whatever. Until you admit that you are something, you can't change it or fix it or replace it or tweak it so that it's a little more positive. You have to admit it first.
That's right. Like Dr. Phil says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Yes, and that's the big thing about archetypes. When you go to the movies, like everybody loves the new Wonder Woman movie. I haven't seen it yet, but everybody loves it. I
haven't either, but I want to.
It's not, from what I hear, it's a great movie, but it's also a universal archetype that we have not seen a whole lot before. A powerful, loving, nurturing woman warrior. Yes. Everybody watches Game of Thrones. Everybody watches Walking Dead, Breaking Bad. I actually, in the book, look at some of the really popular movies and TV series and even things that sound silly, like the Brady Bunch. If you look at the Brady Bunch, it was so successful. It was so cheesy. And yet each one of those characters represented a different archetype. You had, Cindy, the innocent young one, and then you had Jan, the misunderstood middle child, and Marcia was the conceited, older, and then Alice was the martyr. I mean, it's just kind of funny. You go look at Gilligan's Island, you look at newer shows, you look at new movies. I went through The Walking Dead, and I identified oh my God, this is why I love this show so much. Rick is the anti-hero, and Carol is the warrior, and you start to really see how archetypes have been such a big part of our lives through stories, through movies and books and fairy tales and folklore
Totally.
and
Now,
television. Oop, you still there?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I'm still here. I was having a little bit of trouble hearing you for a moment, but I think it's all cleared up now. Now, before we get too far gone here, because we've got about 18 minutes left, I guess, in the show, I want to know, how do we get your books? I'm sure we can go to Amazon, but also we should go to your website. Is that mariedjones.com?
mariedjones.com is my website. The Archetype book should be in bookstores. I think it's online. It's available online already. My belief is that it hits bookstores next week.
Oh,
but,
great.
Who knows? It could already be, so it should be out soon. Mind Wars is already online and in bookstores. It's been out for a little over a year. And then I have a new book coming out in September, about one of the biggest archetypes of all. It's the history of demons, the devil, and fallen angels. And boy, talk about universal symbols. Wow, that's a big one. So that would be out. So people can go to their normal brick and mortar bookstores. If they don't have the book, order it. It doesn't cost you anything, or buy them online. Either way.
Great. Now, the demon book, do you have a title for it yet?
I believe it's called Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels.
Ooh,
and it's Visible Ink Press, which is a new publisher that I'm working with. And they're really awesome. And they do these gigantic, almost encyclopedic books. So that book is going to have just about everything you could possibly imagine having to do. Literally, I document the history of evil, demons, the devil, fallen angels, not just, the way we think about them in modern times, but as concepts. How did they evolve as ideas? The idea of evil, where did that come from? And the devil and Satan and Lucifer, and how they're the same and yet they're all different, and just all kinds of stuff. It really is encyclopedic.
That's
really
fantastic.
Exhausting.
Are you going to cover things like Asmodeus and King Solomon and
everything?
It's going to be good. I can't wait.
And what was really fascinating, it goes from the origin of evil and how it was a necessity of, our belief in duality as primitive people. When we looked at nature, we began to categorize things that happened as, that's good, that benefits me, and lightning storm, earthquake, that bad, that evil. That's how evil. And then we applied deities to those ideas, and just traced the whole origin of these concepts right up to modern times. The book goes through the satanic panic and modern Satanism. It goes back to the Inquisition and the witch burnings, and how the Catholic Church was involved in shaping our perceptions of Satan and demons. And it goes through jinn and how aliens and demons have possibly been interchanged, and just literally every single thing you could think of. If I left anything out of that book, I will be surprised.
Yeah, I wondered.
But it was fascinating.
I did wonder about that, because you do hear, some people, have the idea that, ETs are demons, and any talk about UFOs and aliens is flirting with the devil.
Well, so and is it possible that, 2,000 years ago, somebody saw a UFO, or even an alien, a gray or whatever, the kind of aliens that we're used to hearing about, and misidentified it as a demon because their religious beliefs were that anything that didn't come from here came from hell. And it's just really interesting to see how a lot of these ideas sort of come into play. And, I have interviews with demonologists and talk about possession and exorcisms. It was a really fascinating book to write, but it's so funny because when I began writing it, I got a lot of warnings from my friends and colleagues in the paranormal field, to be careful that when you open this door, bad things could happen. Well, nothing bad happened except for computer issues, which I have, all the time anyway. But I really did, and I wrote it, and it was written objectively. The book is written very objectively. It's really meant to convey information more so than personal opinion. But I did kind of start looking around and looking over my shoulder and thinking, oh my God, do I want to try to get out of this deal? Maybe I should ask my agent, can I get out? But I powered through and nothing bad happened. And it was absolutely fascinating to learn about the different beliefs all over the world and how they evolved.
Yeah, in some cultures,
I think it's going to be a great book.
Some cultures and religions don't believe in Satan or hell. That was a concept that came later on. And I don't, if I'm mistaken, I do apologize to all my Jewish friends and listeners, but I do believe that in the Jewish faith, they don't have the concept of, you sin, you go to hell. And they don't believe in Satan.
Eastern traditions.
Yes,
certainly. In Hinduism, they talk a lot about there are demons in both, but they have different names. They have different personifications, you could say. But those are more belief systems that evolve around personal responsibility and paying the consequences for your actions. And in Buddhism, we know that is you pay karmic debt, karmic consequences. And the only way you ever get off the wheel of karma is when you are free from having to do that. So, there's all these different personifications. Lucifer is so fascinating because there's some really wonderful evidence out there that the whole concept of Lucifer came from our ancestors seeing Venus, the bright, shining morning star, and how Lucifer is actually referred to in the Bible a couple of times as the morning star. And it's really interesting stuff that I had never been exposed to very much. I think for anybody who thinks they know about the subject matter, I think they're going to be blown away.
They're going to learn something. I just did right then because I did not know that.
Yeah. When you really dig, it's amazing when you are forced, because you're writing a book and you have to research, and you're forced to really dig deep to find, where did all this stuff begin? And I love the history of words, etymology.
Oh, yes.
Yes, because you can learn so much about something by tracing the history of the word itself.
Going back to the root, absolutely.
Came from the Old English, whatever. Like, oh, wow, okay, that's unusual. And I love that. I always try to include that.
Yes, I've started really getting into the power of words and also about how we say words, but we don't really, we say them because, it's a shorthand for getting our point across, but we don't really think about the words and what the origin was and what they really, really mean. It's very interesting. That's a whole other ball.
Well, and what's really interesting, too, is that, so much of before the written and spoken language really became sophisticated, we really communicated in symbols and drawings and images. So a lot of that goes back to the archetypal images that no matter what tribe you came from, or no matter where in the world you were wandering around, you understood what that meant.
Yes.
And how even today we have those subtleties in our language. We have we have subtext, things that are understood on a a more subtle level. And it's just, I mean, it's not that I'm blaming religion, but when you look at the devil and the idea of Satan and demons from a historical aspect, and you really try to trace it back to the origin, you really get to see firsthand the influence that religion had on taking ideas and making them their own for their own purposes. Now, I'm not saying they did that for sinister purposes. I believe that the Catholic Church felt the need to keep its people under control by bringing into their belief system the idea that if you do something bad, you're going to go to hell, and Satan will be there, and he's not very nice. Because I remember as a kid being told that. So they just kind of hijacked some of the beliefs, the concepts as they were evolving, and made them their own for their own benefit, just as every other religion did. And that led to the Inquisition and the witch burnings, and and unfortunately, there's still persecution today. Another really fascinating thing I learned is how Satanism, the true Church of Satan, and the Temple of Set, modern Satanism, is not what people think it is. And that there are people, I've met a lot of Church of Satan members over the course of my life, since I started writing these books, interestingly, who are almost like atheists. They're very pro-science. They're hedonists. They don't believe in violence. They don't kill babies. They don't sacrifice animals. They don't murder, rape, or any of those things. They're very much into ritual, and they embrace the dark side and the light. And it was really interesting because I had those same stereotypes. There are cults out there. There are satanic cults that take it to the extreme, but they're not following the true doctrine that the real Satanists do. That was fascinating to me because I was one of those people that thought they were baby killing, dog, cat eating, and it was really fascinating to find out that those are the extreme nut jobs.
Yeah, I guess there's a whole esoteric study or involvement in Luciferianism.
Yeah.
Which I think is
and
probably
a lot of
different.
Movie stars were involved in it too. Yeah.
Yes.
And because they wanted to study the occult. They wanted to understand the shadow, the dark, the darker aspects of reality, and you could say that it's more self-centered, definitely hedonistic, but that was fascinating. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but
I'm sure.
My job as a writer is to present the information as it is and not cater to anybody's particular beliefs. So, and I think this book includes there's a amazingly shocking piece about a guy that I know. He's been in touch with me for a couple of years, who claims to be a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. And I put his essay in there because I wanted to show both sides of the coin. And it's MK Ultra associated, very scary stuff. I can't prove any of it either way, but I thought, this is important. These people are out there making these claims, and, this needs to be shown. This needs to be seen as part of the dialogue. So it's going to be an interesting book.
Oh, gosh, it sounds like it. Now, you mentioned that a lot of, Hollywood stars were involved in, I know there were people that were involved in, Anton LaVey's Church of Satan out here.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was like the hip thing to do,
It was, it was back in the day. But, I don't know about the Luciferianism side of it. I don't know if that's the same thing. But in your book that's coming up, are you going to talk about any of those people and sharing any of those stories, or are you not naming names?
Yeah, and, I name some names because they're a matter of public record. And a lot of them are, stars of the 50s, 60s, 70s that
the one that comes to my mind is Jane Mansfield. That
yes, she was a big one.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, now I'm like drawing a blank, but they're stars of that era and a little bit later. So we're not talking about anybody today because
Correct.
and those people very well could be, but I wanted to show how this was a very trendy thing. And it's like Aleister Crowley. Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was a huge follower of his work. Jimmy Page was not a bad person. He was just fascinated with magic, with ritual magic, and really embraced a lot of it in the music and the symbolism on their album covers and whatnot.
And he bought Aleister Crowley's house, didn't he? He lived in Aleister Crowley's.
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought that was so. I was like, I want to go there. And Aleister Crowley was a very interesting person.
Very
real
interesting
character.
Very
real
much
character. So I get into him. I get into Anton LaVey and some of the other characters that sort of set the foundation for Satanism, the occult. And everybody groups all that into the same thing. But really, I really wanted to show how each thing is so different.
Oh, I can't wait for that to come out. That's going to be very enlightening. I know I'm going to learn some new things since I already learned a couple things tonight.
I did.
I can't imagine.
I figure if I learned them, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine what else I'm going to learn if I read the whole book. But gosh, we're heading right in to the end of the show. In fact, I believe the music has just started rolling. So thank you very much, Marie D. Jones, for joining me tonight.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated.
Welcome.
It's been way too long.
I'll come back after the Devil book is out. We'll talk Devil.
You got to. Oh, that'll be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for listening. Good night.